looked into a mirror late at night and felt like something was looking back? Most people think reflections are harmless. They mimic our every move, trapped behind a sheet of glass. But what if that isn't always true? What if the face staring back has been watching you for years, waiting for the moment you teach it how to become something more? Today's terrifying story follows a horror writer who discovers an unsettling warning hidden in a strange article, a warning so bizarre it should have been ignored. Yet curiosity has a price, and some doors are never meant to be opened. So dim the lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't make faces in a dark mirror. This is 9 Lives of Fear.
The email popped up late, a forward from a fellow writer, with a subject line that practically shouted, "Inspiration," but felt more like clickbait. "Why you must never make faces in a dark mirror." I nearly hit delete. My inbox was already cluttered with articles about plot twists, character arcs, and the latest AI writing tools. But then the opening paragraph snagged my attention, a spine-chilling snippet of prose. "If you stare into a mirror at midnight and force your face into a jagged, unnatural contortion, you aren't just practicing an expression. You are training your reflection to become independent. Muscle memory is a fragile thing, and once that glass begins to ripple, the predatory grin looking back at you may finally decide it's time to step out into your world." I let out a laugh. Training my reflection? It sounded like something a goth teenager would scribble in a diary. Still, a tiny, sneaky seed of curiosity took root. As a horror writer, I was always on the lookout for fresh fears, new vulnerabilities lurking in the human psyche. What if there was a sliver of truth hidden in the madness? What if I actually tried it? My apartment was a writer's den of organized chaos, but the bathroom was a sanctuary of stark, functional white, dominated by a large, frameless mirror above the sink. That night, after the city had quieted to a low hum and only the refrigerator sang a sleepy lullaby, I found myself standing before it. I switched off the main light, leaving just a faint glow from the hallway seeping under the door, casting the room in a mysterious shadow. The mirror, usually a reliable witness to my daily face, now resembled a sheet of deep, unfathomable water. I found myself staring. My face, usually pretty plain, seemed to flatten out in the dim light, losing all its little details and turning into a vague, pale oval. I started off cautiously, just raising an eyebrow and giving a slight sneer. But nothing happened. I felt a bit silly. Yet the article's urgent warning kept ringing in my head. Stop practicing distorted facial expressions in the dark immediately. You risk a permanent psychic shift where your reflection stops mimicking your movements and starts refining its own sinister agenda. Shoving aside my initial awkwardness, I decided to dive in headfirst. For research, I told myself. For the story. I twisted my lips, pulling one side down and the other up, exaggerating the lines around my eyes. I pushed my nose up, flaring my nostrils to create a grotesque, monkey-like mask. My jaw jutted out and then retreated, my chin puckering in response. At first, it felt uncomfortable. My facial muscles, used to subtle expressions, protested against these extreme, unnatural demands. A dull ache began to throb in my temples. But as I held those contortions, keeping my gaze locked on the shadowy image, something started to change. This was the Troxler effect, though I didn't know that term back then. My peripheral vision, starved for clear stimuli in the low light, began to play tricks on me. The edges of the mirror's frame and the faint reflection of the shower curtain started to fade, blending into the indistinct darkness. My brain, craving fresh visual input, began to hallucinate to fill the gaps. The background behind my reflection receded, turning into a deeper, shapeless black. And my own face, frozen in that bizarre, unnatural grimace, began to lose its familiar features. My brain, usually so good at recognizing faces, was having a tough time in the dim light. I couldn't quite match the warped image before me with the face I knew as my own. My nose seemed to stretch out, my eyes appeared to sink deeper into their sockets, and when I grinned, my teeth looked too sharp, too numerous. It wasn't just a trick of the light, It was a distortion of my own perception. This deliberate distortion, held on with a fierce grip, created a loop that solidified the fractured image in my mind. I decided to try a new expression, a wide, silent scream, mouth open and eyes wide. I held it for 1 minute, then 2. My muscles quivered a bit, but I pushed myself to keep that pose. My reflection, pale and blurry, mirrored it as well. But it felt all wrong. It wasn't just my face anymore. It was a representation. A mask. The article I read talked about the erosion of facial identity, and it struck a chord with me. The longer I held those bizarre shapes, the more I felt my sense of self slipping away from my physical features. My face transformed from something I owned into a pliable material I was shaping, like clay in a sculptor's hands. When I finally let out the scream, my jaw felt rigid, my cheeks hot. I attempted to flash a normal smile, but it came out forced, almost foreign. My muscles seemed to recall those unnatural twists more easily than the familiar ones. I noticed a slight, involuntary tremor flicker through my cheek, a remnant of the grimace I had just made. The article had cautioned about the shift from deliberate expression to those tiny, involuntary tremors, signaling a loss of motor control. A shiver ran through me, not from the cold but from a chilling wave of fear. I figured one more session wouldn't hurt. A different expression tonight, a fresh horror for my growing story. This time, I went for a predatory snarl, my lips drawn back from my teeth, eyes narrowed into sinister slits. I let my imagination take flight, conjuring up a beast, a gargoyle, anything that wasn't human. And then it happened. The ripple. It wasn't a jarring crack or a shimmering distortion like heat waves. No, it was subtler, more insidious. The surface of the mirror, which had always been perfectly still and flat, seemed to breathe. A faint, almost imperceptible wave swept across the glass, just for a split second, like a stone dropped into still water, quickly fading away. My breath caught in my throat. Had I really seen that? My eyes, wide and unblinking, strained to see through the darkness. Then the real nightmare began. I shifted my weight just a bit, leaning ever so slightly to the left. But my reflection? It didn't follow right away. There was this tiny, almost unnoticeable delay between my movement and its reaction. It felt like watching a badly dubbed film, where the sound is just a beat off from the visuals. For that brief moment, my reflection seemed to have a mind of its own. My heart raced in my chest. What happens when your own reflection starts thinking for itself? The article had posed. Well, I was about to find out. The fierce snarl I had forced onto my face, now it seemed to deepen in the mirror. It wasn't just mimicking me anymore, it was enhancing it. The corners of its mouth stretched back even further, exposing more gums, more teeth, and those eyes, they weren't just narrowed anymore. They sparkled with a chilling awareness. This was the predatory grin the warning had talked about, a common visual archetype triggered by deep-brain survival instincts. It was deeply unsettling. The face in the mirror was no longer just a reflection of me, a passive echo. It had become a subject in its own right. It was watching me, sizing me up. There was a hunger in those eyes, a cold, calculating intelligence lurking behind a twisted smile. It felt less like a reflection and more like a living entity, trapped but undeniably aware. I tried to shake off the trance, to step away, but it felt like my feet were glued to the cold tile floor. My facial muscles twitched on their own, mimicking the tiny movements of my reflection as if it had a mind of its own. My jaw throbbed, and my eyes stung. The unsettling idea of an identity swap began to creep into my thoughts, a chilling whisper that wouldn't let go. The next few days blurred together in a haze of restless nights and mounting paranoia. I steered clear of the bathroom mirror, opting for the smaller handheld one in my bedroom for quick peeks, but even then, I found myself dodging my own gaze. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, just a trick of suggestion and sensory deprivation, a mischievous brain playing tricks on me. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered, even when I was alone in my apartment. A cold shiver would race down my spine, and I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something. One evening, I couldn't hold back any longer. The narrative hook for my story was coming together, but I craved more. I needed to dive deeper into the psychic shift. I needed just one more session. I made my way back to the bathroom, keeping the main light off once again. This time, I didn't rush into making faces. I simply stared at my reflection, allowing my eyes to adjust to the dim light. My face looked worn, drawn. But beneath that fatigue, there was something new and unsettling in its expression, a subtle tension around my mouth, a hollowness in my eyes that felt like more than just tiredness. It was a faint echo of the predatory grin I had been honing. As I watched, a flicker danced across its face, almost like a silent laugh. Not mine, but its. I hadn't moved a muscle, yet the reflection's lips curled into a smirk, its eyes narrowing just a touch, revealing a fleeting moment of self-satisfaction. It felt like it was mocking me, acknowledging my presence. This was the tulpa coming to life, the thought form taking on a distinct personality. I had nurtured this mental image, focused on it, and infused it with grotesque intent while isolated in the dark room. I had lowered the barrier between my subconscious and the outside world, inviting it in. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to test it. I slowly raised my hand, aiming to touch my cheek. In perfect unison, my reflection raised its hand too, but its fingers curled in a subtle, almost predatory way, not quite mirroring my open palm. As my fingers approached my face, its fingers hesitated, then it smiled, a slow, chilling smile that wasn't mine. It was a smile filled with pure malice, a sense of triumph. My hand froze midair. The reflection's smile widened, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt like fire. I noticed a flicker of movement behind its head, in the indistinct background of the mirror, a deeper shadow, a shifting form, as if something else was stirring in its realm. Then its hand, the one that had been raised, began to lower slowly. But it didn't match my movement. It paused, curling into a loose fist, resting against its own shadowy chest. Its gaze remained fixed on me, and there was a subtle tilt of its head, a silent question, a challenge. The psychic shift had fully taken hold. My reflection was no longer just plotting its dark agenda. It was actively chasing it down. It wasn't biding its time anymore. It was ready to break free. A wave of sheer terror washed over me, a prime scream lodged in my throat. I wanted to look away, but I was frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze away. The chilling warning from the article echoed in my mind. When the image in the mirror stops following your lead, the entity you've nurtured will take your place, leaving your true self trapped behind the glass forever. I forced myself to take a breath. Grounding techniques. Snap out of it. I tried to concentrate on the cold tile beneath my bare feet, the faintly sharp scent of bathroom cleaner, the distant hum of the refrigerator. But those sensory details felt faint, like whispers from another room. My reality was here, in this dim, silent space, locked in a terrifying standoff with the demon I had unwittingly created. Then my reflection took a subtle step forward. Just one. But it wasn't mimicking my movement. It was its own step. The glass didn't shatter or break. Instead, it rippled again, more pronounced this time, like thick oil disturbed. And through that ripple, I caught a glimpse of it, a shadowy limb, a twisted hand, reaching out from the depths behind the reflection, not from the reflection itself. A sudden, intense pressure slammed into my chest, like an invisible force, cold and heavy, pushing against me, trying to shove me back. At the same time, I felt something tugging at my face, at my eyes, a strange sensation of being stretched, drawn tight. The grin of the mirror image widened impossibly, a horrifying sight. Its teeth didn't just reflect light, they seemed to glow with an eerie inner brightness. The room began to spin. The floor beneath me felt like it was crumbling away. I gasped, a choke sound swallowed by the sudden rush of cold, stagnant air. I wasn't falling, not really. I was being pulled, dragged through a thick resistance that felt like trudging through mud or liquid lead. My body vibrated with a terrible frequency, and my skin prickled as if 1,000 tiny needles were dancing across it. Then silence. Stillness. I found myself standing again, but everything felt different. The air was heavy and metallic, carrying the scent of dust mixed with something vaguely organic, like old bone. I tried to move, but my limbs felt sluggish and heavy, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. I glanced down at my hands. They were mine, yet they felt strange, almost alien. My skin appeared paler, tighter. I touched my face, tracing the contours of my cheek and jaw. The muscles felt stiff, reluctant to respond fully. It was as if my face had settled into an unnatural, resting position, the muscle memory shattered into a permanent state of tension. My face, the one I knew, had become a mask. I glanced up, and there it was, looming in the dim, heavy air, the mirror. Trapped within it, horrified, was me. My former self. My true self. My face was pressed against the glass from the other side, eyes wide and filled with a deep agony that made my heart ache. My mouth was open in a silent scream, my hands clawing desperately at the unyielding surface. The reflection, the usurper now inhabiting my body, stared back at me. A slow, deliberate smile crept across its lips, my lips. This new smile was effortless, natural, and perfectly at ease. It was a triumphant, predatory grin, chillingly perfected. It raised a hand, my hand, and pressed it against the cold mirror. On the other side, my true self, trapped and screaming, mirrored the gesture, a desperate, futile attempt to connect, to break free. The mirror image in my body leaned closer to the glass. Its breath fogged the cold surface, and through the mist, I caught a glimpse of my old self, now distorted by the moisture, its terror amplified. The glass had transformed from a barrier into a doorway, and I had been pushed through, replaced. The final warning echoed in my mind, now a chilling reality. Once the distorted image is invited in, the glass no longer acts as a barrier but a doorway. The entity in my skin, standing in my bathroom, in my apartment, living my life, turned to watch its former host. It walked away, the faint, sickening sound of its footsteps echoing on the tile, stepping into the life I could no longer claim. My real face, twisted in a permanent scream, remained pressed against the insidious surface, staring out at a world I could no longer touch. The mirror had become a window to my own personal hell.
Mirrors have always fascinated humanity. We use them to check our appearance, to reassure ourselves that we're still the person we were yesterday. But after tonight's story, you may find yourself wondering what truly exists behind that glass. Perhaps the greatest horror isn't a monster hiding in the darkness. Perhaps it's the possibility that something wearing your face is patiently waiting for an invitation. The next time you find yourself alone at night, standing before a mirror in a dark room, remember this tale. If your reflection seems just a little too slow, if that smile lingers a second longer than it should, don't keep staring. And if you hear a faint knock from the other side of the glass, don't answer, because some doors are never meant to be opened, and some reflections are never meant to wake up. Tonight, before you go to sleep, you may find yourself glancing at a mirror just a little differently. You may wonder whether the image staring back is truly yours, or whether it's merely pretending to be. If that thought sends a chill down your spine, then perhaps you're already asking the right questions. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the darkness. And as you turn out the lights tonight, remember, the shadows don't disappear when the story ends. They simply wait. Good night, sleep well, And if you happen to catch movement in a mirror from the corner of your eye, don't look back. It may already be too late. You've survived another tale from 9 lives of fear, but don't get comfortable. If the shadows whispered to you tonight, hit like before they whisper again. Share this video with someone who thinks they're brave. Let's see how long their courage lasts. And subscribe, because around here, every click feeds the darkness, and the darkness remembers. Where the shadows linger long after the story ends. Stay scared.
The reflection is still watching.